Dr. Marcus Webb snatched the chart from Claire Morgan's hands without looking at her. Not a glance, not a word. He flipped through the pages she had spent 40 minutes carefully updating, snorted once and dropped it on the floor. Right there in the middle of the nurse's station, in front of every resident on the floor, he let it fall. "Get me someone who actually knows what they're doing," he said. The chart lay open on the linoleum. Claire stood very still. Nobody moved to pick it up. Nobody said a word. If this story already has your heart pounding, you are exactly where you need to be. Subscribe to this channel right now, hit that notification bell, and follow this story and all the way to the end. And drop a comment telling me what city you are watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Claire Morgan bent down and picked the chart up herself. She smoothed the cover page with her thumb, set it back on the station counter, with both hands flat on top of it, and said nothing. Her expression did not change. Her voice did not crack. The residents standing nearby looked everywhere except at her, at the ceiling, at their shoes, at the dry erase board on the wall that hadn't been updated since Tuesday. Nobody wanted to be the one who made eye contact with her in that moment, because doing so would have meant acknowledging what they had all just witnessed, and acknowledging it would have required someone to say something, and nobody on that floor was willing to say something to Dr. Marcus Webb. He was already gone. Halfway down the hall, coat flaring, already barking into his phone about somebody else's problem, somebody else's mistake. Claire tucked the chart under her arm and walked back toward Base 7. That was the thing about Claire Morgan that most people never understood. She did not need them to say something. She had been doing this job for 3 years at Boston University Hospital, and in those 3 years, she had learned that the people worth knowing eventually figured it out on their own. The ones who didn't, well, they were the ones dropping charts on the floor and walking away. She was 32 years old, dirty blonde hair she kept pulled back so tight it looked almost brown under the fluorescent lights. Gray blue eyes that were calm in a way that occasionally made people uncomfortable, like still water you couldn't see the bottom of. A thin scar above her left eyebrow, which she had told exactly no one the story of. She was not small, but she wore her scrubs a size too large, and she moved in a way that was deliberately unhurried, deliberately soft around the edges, like someone who had spent years learning how to take up less space. Most of the nurses on the night shift thought she was shy. A few of the residents thought she was slow. Dr. Webb had apparently decided she was invisible, which suited her just fine. Base 7 held a 61-year-old man named Gerald Hutchins, who had come in 3 hours ago complaining of chest tightness and had since convinced himself he was dying, then convinced himself he wasn't, then convinced himself he was again. His wife Donna sat in the chair beside him with her coat still on, holding his hand and watching Claire the way people watch someone they've decided to trust. "You're back," Gerald said. "I'm back," Claire said. She checked his IV line, checked his monitor readings, wrote the numbers in her head before she wrote them on the chart. "The tall doctor hasn't been back," Gerald said. "Dr. Webb has a full floor tonight. He walked past the door twice and didn't stop." Claire looked at Gerald's numbers. His pressure was still elevated, but trending down. His rhythm was stable. He was going to be fine, which she had known from the first 15 minutes, though she had not said so because the cardiology fellow needed to confirm it, and she was not the one making that call tonight. "He's going to stop," she said. "Give it another hour." "Is he good?" Donna asked. Not Gerald's health, she meant Webb. Claire could hear it in the way she asked, careful and quiet, the way women ask questions when they already suspect the answer, but need to hear it anyway. Claire looked at her. "He's technically excellent," she said, which was the truest thing she could say. That was also the kindest. Donna nodded like she understood exactly what that meant. Claire finished her notes, told them both she'd be back in 40 minutes, and stepped out of Base 7 into the hallway where the noise of the ER hit her like a wall. Voices and monitors, and someone laughing too loud at the nurse's station, and the distant sound of an argument she recognized as the one that had been building between the overnight charge nurse, Patricia Osei, and the hospital's new administrative supervisor for the last hour and a half. She could hear Patricia's voice from the corridor, measured, precise, controlled in the way of someone who has learned that volume is less effective than clarity. "I need 2 more bodies on this floor before midnight, David. That is not a request. I have 14 patients, 3 of whom are critical, and I have 5 nurses. Do the math." Claire turned the corner and saw them, Patricia standing with her arms crossed and her badge clipped at an angle. David Harmon, the administrative supervisor, standing with a tablet in front of him like a shield, scrolling through something with the detached energy of a man who had made his decision before the conversation started. "I've looked at the staffing projections," David began. "I don't need projections," Patricia said. "I need nurses." Claire walked past them without stopping. She had heard this argument before. She would hear it again. She went to the supply room, restocked her cart, checked her pager, and was on her way back to the main floor when she passed room 4 and stopped. Room 4 had a new patient. She could see him through the window, a big man, late 40s, construction clothes, a bandage wrapped around his right hand that had been done quickly and not very well. He was sitting on the edge of the bed with his left foot bouncing and his eyes on the door, and even through the glass, Claire could see that he was still drunk. His name, according to the board, was Danny Kowalski. Nail gun injury, moderate depth, right palm. She had been asked to check his vitals and update his file while the hand surgeon was pulled into another case. She pushed the door open. He looked at her and grinned. The grin of a man who has decided that this situation, despite the bandaged hand and the fluorescent lighting and the hospital smell, is actually going pretty well for him. "Well, hey there," he said. "Mr. Kowalski, I'm Claire. I'll be checking your vitals." "Claire," he repeated, tasting the name like he'd been handed something unexpectedly good. "That's a nice name. You got a last name to go with that." She wrapped the blood pressure cuff around his arm without responding. His pressure was high, not dangerously, but meaningfully. "You ever get off before midnight?" he asked. Claire pumped the cuff, read the gauge, wrote the number. "Because I was thinking when they let me out of here." "Mr. Kowalski," Claire said, "I need you to hold still and hold your arm out straight." He held it out. He was still grinning. "I'm just saying, woman like you working nights bet you don't get out much." She checked his pulse. 78. She noted it. "Come on," he said. "I'm just being friendly." "Your vitals are stable," Claire said. "The hand surgeon will be with you within the hour. If your pain increases significantly, use the call button." She reached for the chart clip on the end of the bed. His free hand came down on top of hers. Not hard, not violent, just deliberate. His palm flat over the back of her hand, holding it in place against the clipboard. The room went very quiet. Claire looked down at his hand on hers. Then she looked up at his face. Her expression did not change. Her voice when she spoke was exactly as level as it had been before. "Remove your hand," she said. Something in her tone made him hesitate. Not the words men like Danny Kowalski had heard those words before and pushed past them. It was something underneath the words. Something flat and certain and absolutely without performance. Like a door that had closed. He lifted his hand. "Sorry," he said, and for the first time he actually sounded it. Claire picked up the chart, made her final note, and walked out of room 4. In the hallway, she stood for 2 seconds with her back against the wall, her eyes closed, her breathing even. Not shaken, she was not shaken. She was doing something else. She was putting something away, carefully in a place where it wouldn't interfere with the rest of her shift. Then she opened her eyes and kept walking. It was 11:47 when the drunk in Bay 2 vomited on the floor and set off a cascade that pulled 2 nurses from the far end of the hall. It was 11:52 when the teenage girl in Bay 9 started crying loud enough to bring her mother in from the waiting room at a run. It was 11:58 when Patricia appeared at Claire's elbow and said in a low voice that carried no drama because Patricia Osei did not do drama, "I need you in Trauma 1. Webb's about to start a procedure he shouldn't be starting without a second set of hands he trusts, and the only hands I trust right now are yours." Claire said 2 minutes. She finished the IV line she was running, capped it, checked the tape, told the patient, an elderly woman named Rose who had come in with a hip fracture and kept asking about her cat, that someone would be back in 10 minutes, and then she moved. Trauma 1 was already full when she pushed through the door. "Doctor." Webb was at the head of the table, gloved, his resident standing to his left, looking uncertain in the particular way residents looked uncertain when they knew they were in over their heads, but hadn't yet decided whether to say so. The patient was a middle-aged man with a chest injury, intubated, monitors, screaming. Webb looked up when Claire came in. His jaw tightened slightly, the only acknowledgement he gave that he had registered her presence, and then he looked back at the field in front of him. "Chest tube," he said to no one in particular. Claire was already at the tray. She had the tube in her hand before the resident had finished turning around. Webb took it without a word. For the next 22 minutes, Claire did not speak unless spoken to, and she was spoken to often because whatever else Dr. Marcus Webb was, he was technically excellent, and technically excellent surgeons in high-pressure situations have an instinct for the hands that know what they're doing. He didn't thank her. He didn't look at her more than twice. But at the end of it, when the patient was stable and the monitors had settled into something close to normal, he paused at the sink beside her and said without turning his head, "Where did you train?" Claire turned off her tap. "Boston College of Nursing." Webb dried his hands. Something crossed his face, not quite skepticism, not quite the thing that came before an apology. Something in between. "You move like someone with more than nursing school," he said. "I've worked busy floors," she said. He looked at her then, really looked for the first time she could remember. It lasted only a second before he turned and walked out. But it was long enough. Claire stood at the sink for a moment after he left. Then she heard it. It started as a vibration more than a sound, a deep rhythmic pulse that she felt in her sternum before she heard it with her ears. Every head in the corridor lifted at the same time the way heads lift when something registers below the level of conscious thought. The fluorescent lights above the supply closet flickered once, twice. Claire went still. She knew that sound. She had not heard it in 4 years, but the body does not forget certain things. The body files them in places that are deeper than memory in the tissue and the nerve and the base of the spine, and it keeps them there regardless of what the mind decides to do with them. Rotor wash, heavy class, more than one. Her hands were already still at her sides. Her breathing had gone shallow and controlled without her choosing it. "What is that?" the resident from Trauma 1 said behind her. He had come out into the hallway and was looking at the ceiling as though the sound were coming from above him. "Is that a helicopter?" "Helicopters," Claire said. "Plural." She walked to the window at the end of the hall. In the parking structure across the street, 2 black helicopters were descending in tight formation, their running lights cutting the dark. Not medevac, not police. The shape was wrong for both. The silhouette was wrong. Military. Her pager went off. Then Patricia's voice came over the intercom, which Patricia never used unless the situation had exceeded the reach of a phone call. "All trauma staff, all available trauma staff to the main bay. Incoming casualties, all hands." The resident looked at Claire. "What's happening?" Claire was already walking. "Get gloves," she said. "Get your team, and stay out of the way until you're told otherwise." Her voice was different now. She did not notice it. The people around her did. The main bay doors opened, and the first stretcher came through, carried at speed by 2 men in tactical gear, their faces hard and their movements practiced in the way of people who have done this before and will have to do it again. A second stretcher behind the first. A third. A fourth. 4 operators down. She could see it from 20 feet from the way they were being carried, from the color of the bandaging and what was soaking through it. Claire pulled gloves from the dispenser on the wall without breaking stride. Webb was already at the first stretcher. "What are we looking at?" he demanded. One of the operators, he was still standing, just barely one hand braced on the edge of the stretcher and one pressed to his own ribs, said, "Fragmentation thoracic. 2 with GSWs, 1 blast injury, 1. He stopped. His eyes had moved past Webb. They had found Claire. He stood upright. Both hands came down to his sides. His posture changed in a way that had nothing to do with pain. "Phoenix," he said. The word landed in the middle of the room like a stone into water. Webb turned. The resident turned. The 2 nurses at the far station turned. The sound of the monitors seemed to recede. Every person in that bay felt it without being able to name what they were feeling. The sudden certainty that something had shifted, that the ground under the conversation had moved, that the woman who had been standing in this room for the last 3 hours was not the woman they had believed her to be. Claire did not move. Her eyes were on the operator's face. He was young, 26, maybe 27, and she did not recognize him, but that meant nothing. She recognized the way he was standing. She recognized the look on his face. She recognized exactly what that word meant coming from that mouth in this room. "You have the wrong person," she said. Her voice was quiet, steady. "No, ma'am," he said. "We don't." Behind him, the second stretcher's patient, a big man, dark-haired blood soaking through the bandaging on his left shoulder, turned his head with what was clearly enormous effort and said in a voice like gravel, "Morgan, don't." And Claire Morgan, who had spent 3 years being invisible, who had dropped aside her eyes and worn her scrubs too large, and picked charts up off the floor without a word, closed her eyes for one single second. Then she stepped forward. "Someone move Webb," she said. Not unkindly, not cruelly, with the calm precision of a person who has just remembered something they were pretending they had forgotten. "Move him now and give me that field." Nobody moved. That was the thing that struck Patricia Osei first, not the helicopters, not the tactical gear, not the word that had come out of that young operator's mouth like a challenge thrown at the floor. What struck her was that nobody moved. An emergency bay that had been running at full speed 30 seconds ago had gone completely still, and the only person in it who seemed unaffected by the stillness was Claire Morgan, who was already pulling on a second pair of gloves and walking toward the first stretcher with the focused calm of someone who had just arrived at work and knew exactly what needed to be done. "I said move him," Claire repeated, and this time there was an edge to it, not anger, something harder than anger, the edge of someone who does not have time to say things twice. Dr. Marcus Webb did not move because he was not accustomed to being told to move. He stood at the head of the first stretcher with his hands at his sides and his jaw set and his eyes doing the thing they did when his authority was questioned, that slow, deliberate narrowing that had made residents cry and nurses transfer to other floors. He looked at Claire. He looked at the operator who had said that word. He looked back at Claire. "Excuse me," he said, "thoracic fragmentation." Claire said not to Webb, but to the room, to whoever was listening and had hands they knew how to use. "I need a chest tray. I need 2 units of ONEG running before I open that dressing, and I need someone to tell me the time of injury." One of the operators, the one still standing, the one with his hand pressed to his own ribs, said, 41 minutes. 41 minutes. Claire's hands were already on the first patient's chest, not frantically, not with the shaking urgency of someone overwhelmed, but with the quick reading quality of hands that were checking everything at once and processing all of it simultaneously. "What's his name?" "Reyes." "Reyes," she said it to the patient. "I'm Claire, you're in a hospital. You're going to be fine. I need you to breathe out for me on 3. 1, 2, 3. The patient, mid-30s, leaned pale under the tactical grime, exhaled, and Claire's hands moved, and the sound that came from his chest in that moment made the resident behind her take a step backward. Webb had not moved. "You don't have surgical privileges at this hospital," he said. "No," Claire agreed. "I don't." "Then you cannot." "I can do a needle decompression with a 14-gauge angiocath and nursing credentials," Claire said without looking up, "which is what I'm doing. If you'd like to take over when I'm done, the field is yours." She paused for exactly 1 beat. "But he's got maybe 4 minutes before that tension converts, and then it won't matter whose credentials are on the chart." Webb looked at the patient. He looked at the monitor the operator had wheeled in from somewhere. He looked at the numbers. Something crossed his face that was not capitulation exactly, but was the thing that comes just before it in a man who is at his core a physician. He stepped back. Claire did not acknowledge it. She was already working. Patricia appeared at her left shoulder like she'd materialized from the air. "What do you need?" "Second patient, the GSW, to the shoulder. He's stable for. Now get the bleeding controlled and keep his airway clear." "Third patient." She glanced at the third stretcher without stopping what she were doing. "Where's the blast injury?" "Bay 3, one of the operators said. "Who's covering Bay 3? A beat of silence that lasted too long. "I am," said a voice Claire did not recognize, and she looked up to see a woman she had never met. 50s, silver hair, clipped short, wearing a white coat with no hospital badge, standing at the edge of the bay with the stillness of someone who had been watching everything and waiting for the right moment to step in. Her eyes were on Claire's face with an expression that was not quite recognition and was not quite surprise and was entirely unreadable. Claire looked at her for 1 second. "Blast injury presents with..." "I know what it presents with," the woman said. Claire went back to Reyes. The next 7 minutes were the kind of 7 minutes that happen in certain rooms and certain situations where time does not move at the same speed it moves everywhere else. It compresses and stretches simultaneously. Claire worked and the people around her worked, and the operators who were still on their feet stood against the walls with their hands loose at their sides, in the practiced stillness of people trained to wait without going somewhere else in their heads. The young operator, the one who had said her name, stayed close, not in the way, just close, watching her hands. She finished with Reyes checked to his chest, watched his numbers change on the monitor, watched the color come back into his face in slow increments, and then she moved to the second patient without pausing. The man on the second stretcher was the one who had said her name in the other way that meant don't, the way that meant I know you and I know what this cost you. He was watching her come toward him with dark eyes that were calm, despite the blood-loss calm in the particular way of people who have spent considerable time in situations where calm was the only available option. Hey, he said. Hey, she said. She checked the dressing on his shoulder. The bleeding had been partially controlled, but not well. She started working without preamble. You didn't have to do that, he said. Do what? Step up. Claire cut away the outer layer of the bandaging. Yes, I did. Morgan, you're losing about 40 cubic centimeters a minute, she said. I need you to stop talking. He stopped talking for about 15 seconds. How long have you been here? 3 years. Boston. Yes. Nobody knew. That was the idea, she said. She applied pressure. He winced but did not make a sound. What's your name? I don't know you. Hargrove. Jake Hargrove. I came in after... He stopped. His jaw tightened. After everything. After Mitchell pulled the file, Claire said. It was not a question. The way she said it told him she had known, or had suspected, or had spent 3 years in a hospital in Boston working a night shift because she understood exactly what pulling that file had meant and what it would mean for anyone who had been connected to her. Hargrove looked at her. He thought you were dead. I know. When they pulled the satellite footage from the extraction, Hargrove, her voice was quiet, final, later. He closed his mouth. Across the bay, Webb was at the monitor above the first stretcher watching Reyes's numbers with the focused attention of a man recalibrating his understanding of a situation. The resident, his name was Eli Clare, had learned that weeks ago when he'd asked her a question about dosing that he was too proud to ask. Webb was standing at Webb's shoulder watching Claire instead of the monitor. Who is she? Eli said quietly to no one. Webb did not answer. The young operator, who had said her name the first time, was still against the wall. He had been watching Claire since she walked in. Now he walked toward her, not quickly stopping a few feet away. Ma'am, he said. I told you, Claire said without looking up from Hargrove's shoulder. You have the wrong person. Ma'am, with respect, we don't. What's your name? Torres, Lucas Torres. I've been with Team 6 for Dome. I know what Team 6 is, Claire said. Her voice was even. There was no heat in it. There was also no give. And I'm telling you that whoever you're looking for, I'm not her. I'm a nurse. I work nights. I need you to go stand somewhere that isn't next to this stretcher. Torres did not go stand somewhere else. He stood exactly where he was. Admiral Mitchell sent us. The pressure she was applying to Hargrove's shoulder did not change. Her hands did not stop. But something in her posture changed, something small in the set of her shoulders, the way her head tilted 2 degrees to the right before she caught it and brought it back. Hargrove saw it. He said nothing. Admiral Mitchell, Claire said, retired 4 years ago. He came back, Torres said, 6 weeks ago, special advisory role. When the situation developed, he was the first person brought into the room, and the first thing he said was... Torres paused, and in the pause, Claire could hear the rest of the bay, the monitors, the sound of Patricia's voice in Bay 3, the low conversation between Webb and his resident. He said, find Phoenix. He said she's the only one who knows the full architecture of what happened. He said if she's still alive, she'll be the only one who can tell us how to stop it. Claire tied off the last compression and set both hands flat on the edge of the stretcher. Stop what? She said. Torres looked at her, young eyes, steady, the kind of steady that is either trained or earned, and in his case, she suspected it was both. The man who put you in the ground 4 years ago, he said. His name is Kessler. You know him. The name moved through the room without making a sound. Claire heard it land in her chest and felt the thing it dislodged there. Not fear, not exactly something older than fear, something that lived in a part of her she had spent 4 years boarding up and painting over, and pretending was structural. She picked up the chart and wrote Hargrove's numbers without her hand shaking. The numbers were good. She had done what she needed to do. Kessler, she said, is in federal custody. Was, Torres said. As of 72 hours ago, he is not. Patricia came back through the bay doors at a half run, which was the closest thing to a run Patricia O.C. ever did. She stopped 3 feet from Claire and dropped her voice, though the way she dropped it meant every person in the vicinity heard every word. Claire, I need to tell you something. Tell me. There are 2 men in the main lobby. Claire looked at her. They came in 10 minutes ago, Patricia said. Civilian clothes. They asked the front desk for the charge nurse, and when Renee asked them what it was about, they said they were looking for a patient transfer. But Renee said, Patricia stopped. She was not a woman who's scared easily. There was something careful in her face now. She said one of them showed her something, a photograph, and the photograph was you. The bay went quiet in a different way than it had gone quiet before. Before it had been the shock of something unexpected. This was the quiet of something confirmed. Torres straightened. His hand had moved to his side in a way that was professional and automatic and deeply alarming in a hospital hallway. How long ago? 10 minutes, Patricia said. Maybe 12. Are they still in the lobby? I don't know. Torres turned and said something into the comm piece at his collar in a voice too low to catch. 2 of the other operators peeled off the wall and moved toward the bay doors without being told twice. Webb, for the first time, looked genuinely uncertain. He had been in this profession for 20 years. He had managed codes and mass casualty events and the particular institutional chaos of a major urban hospital. He had not managed this. Someone needs to tell me what is happening, he said. Nobody answered him immediately, which in Claire's experience was never a good sign. Claire looked at Hargrove. Hargrove looked back at her with the expression of a man who had known this moment was coming and had not figured out how to make it easier. How many? She said. We don't know, Hargrove said. The operation was compromised 3 days ago. We don't know how much he has or how many assets he moved before the extraction. We know he has the hospital on a list. We know he stopped. He chose his next words carefully. We know he knows you're here. The resident Eli said, I'm sorry, should I go somewhere? He looked at the door, then at Webb, then at Claire. Stay, Claire said, and pull up the hospital's internal floor plan on the station computer. I want to know every access point between this bay and the roof. Eli stared at her. The roof, Claire said. Do it now. He went. Webb watched him go, then Webb looked at Claire with an expression she had not seen on his face before. Not respect, not quite, but the precursor to it, the moment before a man who has been wrong about something begins to understand the shape of how wrong he was. Morgan, he said. She looked at him. Tell me what you need, he said. It was 4 words. It cost him something to say them. Claire saw that, registered it, and filed it away. I need you to move every non-critical patient on this floor to the east wing, she said. I need you to do it in the next 15 minutes, and I need it to look like a routine transfer. No panic, no running. Can you do that? Yes, Webb said. Then go, she said. He went. Patricia had not moved. She was watching Claire with an expression that was something Claire had never seen directed at her before. Not in 3 years on this floor. Not in any of the dozens of shifts they had worked side by side. It was the expression of a woman realizing she had been standing next to someone she did not know and was only now beginning to understand why. Patricia, Claire said, yes. You didn't see me work tonight. Patricia looked at her for a long moment. I have no idea what you're talking about, she said. And then, without another word, she walked toward the east wing. Torres was back. He had been listening. There's a stairwell on the north end of the building that's not showing on any digital floor plan. Claire looked at him. How do you know about that stairwell? We did advance work on this location 6 months ago, Torres said, when we first started tracking Kessler's movements. 6 months ago, Claire said. You've been tracking him for 6 months. Yes, ma'am. And you came here tonight. Yes, ma'am. Which means you led him here, she said. Her voice had not changed. It was still level, still controlled. But Torres went very still, in the way people go still when they understand they have made a mistake in the presence of someone who is not going to pretend otherwise. He opened his mouth, closed it. It's done, Claire said. We move forward from where we are. But I need you to understand something, Torres. She looked at him directly, and whatever he saw in her eyes in that moment did what the word Phoenix had not quite managed to do it. Settled the last piece of the question into place, the question he had been carrying since the mission briefing, the question of whether the woman Mitchell had described was real, or whether she was the kind of story that gets bigger every time it's told. The next decision I make saves people in this building, and the decision after that puts Kessler back in a box he doesn't come out of. Those are the only two things happening tonight. Everything else is noise. Are we clear? Yes, ma'am, Torres said. Somewhere on the floor above them, a door opened and closed. Hard. Not a hospital sound, not the swing of a pneumatic door or the soft click of a room being checked. Hard. Deliberate. Claire heard it. She tilted her head up toward the ceiling for 1 second listening, and what she heard in the silence that followed was not nothing. It was footsteps, measured, patient, moving in the specific direction of the stairwell Torres had just told her was not on the digital floor plan. She pulled gloves off her hands and dropped them in the waste bin without looking. Tell your people on the roof to hold position, she said to Torres. Don't engage, not yet. What are you going to do? Claire was already moving toward the North Corridor. My job, she said. The North Corridor of Boston University Hospital at midnight was the kind of quiet that had nothing peaceful in it. The overhead lights ran at 60% after 11, a cost-cutting measure that had been in place since Claire's second month on the floor, and the reduced light turned the hallway into something that felt narrower than it was, the walls closer, the ceiling lower. Claire had walked this corridor hundreds of times. She knew every supply closet, every linen cart station, every door that stuck, and every door that swung too hard. She knew that the third panel of flooring from the north stairwell door had a soft spot that telegraphed footsteps if you didn't know to step to the left of it. She stepped to the left of it. Behind her, Torres was moving too. She had not told him to follow her, and she had not told him not to. He was smart enough to understand both things simultaneously, smart enough to move quietly, which put him ahead of most people she had worked with. The stairwell door was closed. The small wire-reinforced window set into it showed nothing but the gray concrete of the landing beyond. Claire did not reach for the handle. She stood to the side of the door, her back against the wall, and listened. Torres came up beside her. He had drawn his weapon, which was the right call and also the wrong call, depending on the next 30 seconds. He looked at her. She held up one hand. Wait. 12 seconds passed. 13, 14. The door opened from the inside. The man who came through it was not what Claire expected, which meant she had expected wrong, which meant she needed to recalibrate faster than she would have liked. He was not tactical. He was not carrying anything visible. He was wearing a hospital volunteer jacket, blue with the BUH logo on the left chest, and he was moving with the relaxed, unhurried energy of someone who had every reason to be in this hallway at this hour. He was also scanning. She saw it in the way his eyes moved, not the wandering look of someone lost, not the direct focus of someone going somewhere, but the sweep, the coverage, the professional assessment of a space divided into sectors and checked in sequence. He was very good at making it look like nothing. Claire stepped into the hallway in front of him. He stopped. Patient services, she said, making her voice the warm, neutral voice of a nurse encountering someone she mildly recognizes. She let her eyes go slightly unfocused, friendly, and unaware. Are you looking for the volunteer coordinator? She usually doesn't come in until 6. The man looked at her. His eyes did the thing, the quick assessment, top to bottom, 30 years of practice, reads condensed into 2 seconds. Claire let him look. She gave him the baggy scrubs and the pulled back hair and the slightly tired expression of a woman 11 hours into a 12-hour shift. I'm just doing a late round, he said. His voice was easy, practiced. Oh, great, Claire smiled. We actually had a couple of patients move to the East Wing in the last few minutes if you're checking on anyone specific. Room reassignments. Sorry, it was kind of last minute. He paused, just barely. Which rooms? Everything past base 6, Claire said. The desk can print you an updated list. She gestured back toward the nurse's station with a nod, comfortable and helpful. The man looked down the north corridor. He looked at the bay doors in the distance. He looked at Claire again, and this time something in his look had shifted, not much but enough. A question he couldn't quite ask. Then Torres stepped up beside her and the man bolted. He was fast, genuinely fast. The kind of fast that was trained, not natural, and he made it 8 steps before Claire caught the back of his collar. With her right hand, used his own momentum, redirected it hard to the left, and put him against the wall with his arm locked at an angle that made movement inadvisable. The whole thing took 4 seconds and made almost no sound. Torres had his weapon up. Down, on the ground, now. He's not armed, Claire said. She had checked on the way down. Not visibly. She kept the pressure on his arm. Who sent you? The man said nothing. His breathing was controlled, which told her he was trained well enough that pain wasn't going to be the lever here. There are 4 operators in this building tonight, Claire said, and they are having a very bad shift and they are looking for a reason to make the rest of this night worse. I am the only thing standing between you and that outcome. So I am going to ask you one more time, and I need you to take the offer. She paused. Who sent you? I want a lawyer, the man said. You're not under arrest, Claire said. You're in a hospital hallway and I'm a nurse. I cannot arrest you. She let him go, stepped back, and Torres kept the weapon level, which means you can walk away right now, straight to the lobby, straight out the front door. She watched his face. But if you do, the 4 men who came in on those helicopters tonight are going to be behind you before you reach the parking structure. The man turned his head. He looked at Torres. He looked at Claire. He made a calculation. Kessler doesn't know you're here, he said. Not exactly. He has the hospital on the list, but he doesn't have a name yet. He has a photograph. Of me. Of a woman. It's not a great photograph. He's working off a description from... He stopped. He had said more than he intended to, and he knew it. From who? Claire said. He closed his mouth. Claire looked at Torres. Take him to Bay 2. Keep it quiet. She was already turning. Find out what name he signed in under and pull the lobby footage from the last hour. Torres lowered his weapon, but his eyes on the man were unambiguous. Move, he said. Claire walked back toward the main bay. Her hands were steady. Her mind was moving at a speed she had not let it move yet in 4 years, sorting and cataloging, pulling threads and checking where they led, and the picture coming together was not a comfortable one. If Kessler had a description but not a confirmed name, it meant the leak was partial. Something had been compromised, but not completely. Someone had talked about her but didn't know enough to name her, which meant the source was peripheral, someone who had seen her without knowing who she was, someone who had... She stopped. Danny Kowalski was gone. Bay 4 was empty. The bed was still in position, the BP cuff still hanging from the rail, the paper sheet on the mattress creased where he had been sitting. He had been waiting on the hand surgeon. He had not been discharged. There was no discharge note on the chart. Claire stood at the door of Bay 4 for 3 seconds. Then she turned and went to the nurse's station. Renee, who was 24 and deeply overwhelmed and had been holding this station together by herself for the last 40 minutes, looked up with the expression of someone who was very ready for someone else to take something. He left about 30 minutes ago, she said before Claire could ask. He just walked out. I didn't have time to... Did he use his phone while he was here? Renee thought about it. When I came by to check on him, maybe 25 minutes before he left, he was on his phone. Texting, I think. 25 minutes before he left. Yeah. Claire did the math. That was before the helicopters, before Phoenix, before any of it. Danny Kowalski had been drunk and inappropriate and had put his hand on hers, and she had been tired and careful and had given him nothing visible, nothing nameable. But she had walked into his room. She had introduced herself. And she was not always as invisible as she believed herself to be. She went back to Hargrove. He was sitting up now, which he should not have been doing, and she almost said so before she saw his face and understood that whether or not he should be sitting up was not a conversation she was going to win right now. The man in Bay 4, she said, Kowalski, construction worker, nail gun injury, came in before you did. Hargrove looked at her carefully. What about him? He left 30 minutes ago. He was on his phone before he left. Hargrove's expression went through something. She recognized the sequence of a man processing information he already suspected and was now having confirmed. He turned to the operator beside him and said something with his eyes that didn't require words, and the operator pulled out a satellite phone and moved to the other side of the bay. Hargrove, Claire said. We had a tail, he said. We picked it up 3 hours out of the base and we thought we shook it. We didn't shake it clean enough. So someone's been on you since you left. Someone's been on this building since before we landed. Claire sat down on the edge of the supply cart, not because she was tired, because she needed a moment where her body was still, so her mind could move freely, and she had learned a long time ago that the two were sometimes at odds, and occasionally the body needed to be reminded which one was in charge. The silver-haired woman was standing at the edge of the bay again. Claire had been aware of her in the peripheral way she was aware of everything, cataloging and filing, without focusing, but now she focused. The woman had not introduced herself. She had not explained why she was here. She had performed a field assessment on the blast injury patient with the precision of someone who had done it hundreds of times, and then she had stayed quietly at the edge of everything watching. "You're not hospital staff," when Claire said. "No," the woman said. "You're not with Torres's team." "No." "Then who are you with?" The woman looked at her for a moment with those unreadable eyes. Then she said, "I was with the team that pulled you out." The bay was suddenly very quiet. Claire looked at her, really looked. The silver hair, the measured stillness, the white coat that fit too well to be borrowed. "The extraction team was 4 people, Claire said. "I knew all 4 of them." "You knew 3, the woman said. "The 4th was holding a perimeter 2 blocks out. You never saw her." Something moved through Claire's chest, not doubt, not quite belief either. Something that needed more before it could become either one. "Why are you here?" "Because when Mitchell got the call 6 weeks ago, I was sitting across the table from him," the woman said. "And when he said find Phoenix, I was the one who said I already know where she is. I've known for 2 years." The silence stretched. 2 years, Claire said. "Yes." "And you didn't—" "I was protecting you," the woman said, "while you were protecting yourself. I figured between the 2 of us, you'd stay buried long enough." Something moved across her face. Not an apology, something older and more complicated than an apology. "I was wrong about the timeline." Hargrove was watching this exchange without speaking. Torres had come back into the bay and was also watching without speaking, which told Claire that whatever this woman had just said, it was not new information to him. "What's your name?" Claire asked. "Calloway," the woman said. "Diane Calloway." Claire filed it. She would either verify it or she wouldn't, and right now it didn't change the operational picture. "How many assets does Kessler have in play right now?" "That we know of, 3 in the building, possibly 5. 3 confirmed, possibly 5, Claire said. "Torres has 2 people on the roof and 4 in the building counting himself." That leaves you," Calloway said. Torres said, "Ma'am, our job is to extract you and the team, and—" "Your job," Claire said, "was to extract me from a hospital where I wasn't supposed to exist without triggering the man who put me in the ground and has now apparently been watching this building for longer than any of us knew. How's that going so far?" Torres did not answer, which was the most honest thing he could have done. Claire stood up. "Reyes," she called across the bay. Reyes, who was still on the stretcher, but whose color had improved significantly in the last 40 minutes, turned his head. "Ma'am, can you walk?" He considered it seriously, which she appreciated. "Yeah," he said, slow. "Then I need you upright in 10 minutes. Hargrove." "Already working on it," Hargrove said, swinging his legs carefully over the side of the stretcher. "I need a count of every person in this building who is not a patient and not on staff. I need to know which exits are being watched and which ones aren't. And I need someone to tell me about the parking structure, because that is where those helicopters are sitting, and if Kessler's people get to those aircraft before we do—" "They won't," Torres said. "I have 2 people." A burst of static from the comm piece at his collar cut him off. He pressed 2 fingers against it and listened. Something changed in his face. The controlled stillness of a trained operator developed a crack in it, small but visible. "Say again," he said into the comm. The voice on the other end said 4 words. Claire couldn't hear all of them, but she heard the last one clearly. "Down." Torres lowered his hand from his ear. He looked at Claire. "Collins is down," he said. "North stairwell, 3rd floor." Nobody spoke. "That's my man on the roof access," Torres said. Claire was already moving toward the equipment cabinet on the wall. She opened it, scanned the contents with eyes that were measuring and calculating, and reached past the standard first aid supplies to the back wall where the emergency trauma kit was stored. She checked it, confirmed its contents in under 15 seconds, and closed it. "Calloway," she said. "Yes." "You said you've been watching this building for 2 years." "Yes." "Then you know it better than Torres does." She slung the trauma kit over her shoulder. "I need you with me. Can you move fast?" Calloway removed the white coat. Underneath it, she was wearing dark clothes that were entirely unsuited to a hospital visit. "Faster than you think," she said. Torres stepped into their path. Not blocking, not hostile, just the weight of a man who had been given a mission and was watching it change shape in real time. "Phoenix," he said, "my orders are to bring you out. Mitchell's direct orders. If Kessler's people have a man on the third floor, the protocol was written for a situation where they didn't know I was here," Claire said. "That situation ended approximately an hour ago." She looked at him. "I'm not leaving this building with 2 of your people down and Kessler's assets inside. That is not something I'm going to do." Torres held her gaze. He was looking for something in her face, permission maybe, or certainty, or the particular quality that made it possible to follow someone into a situation that protocol said you shouldn't be walking into. Whatever he was looking for, he apparently found it. He stepped aside. Claire went through the bay doors into the corridor, Calloway 1 step behind her, the trauma kit on her shoulder, moving at the pace of someone who was not running, but was covering ground at a rate that made running look inefficient. Hargrove called her name from behind her. She turned. He was on his feet. He looked terrible and completely certain. "You're not going up there alone," he said. "You have a through and through in your shoulder," Claire said. "I know." He picked up the tactical vest someone had left on the chair beside his stretcher and began putting it on with one arm slowly, with the grimace of a man who was making a decision and had already accepted what it would cost him. "I've worked through worse." Claire looked at him for a moment. 3 years ago, 4 years ago, she would have argued. She would have given him the numbers: blood loss, mobility risk of secondary injury, and she would have made the case with the precision of someone who had been trained to keep people alive, regardless of what they wanted. Instead, she said, "Stay on my left. Don't use the right arm." "Understood," Hargrove said. They moved into the north corridor together, and the sound of the hospital, the monitors, the distant voices, the pneumatic doors fell away behind them, replaced by the kind of silence that was not absence of sound, but presence of everything that mattered. Above them, somewhere on the third floor, there was a man who was not supposed to be here. There was a hospital full of people who did not know what was moving through their building tonight. And there was Claire Morgan, who had spent 3 years learning how to be invisible, walking toward the one situation in which invisible was no longer an option. She took the stairs 2 at a time. The third floor of Boston University Hospital was administrative territory, after hours offices, records, the billing department, a conference room that smelled permanently of old coffee and budget anxiety. There were no patients up here at midnight, no monitors, no call buttons, no reason for anyone to be walking these hallways unless they worked here or they were looking for something that couldn't be found on the floors below. Collins was on the floor outside the stairwell door, propped against the wall and with one hand pressed to his left side, and his breathing shallow but controlled. He was conscious. That was the first thing Claire checked when she came through the door, his eyes, which were open and tracking, which meant the situation was bad, but not irreversible. She was beside him before Hargrove had cleared the last step. "Talk to me," she said. "Caught it coming through the door," Collins said. "Didn't see him until he was already moving." He lifted his hand slightly. The wound beneath it was a knife wound, not a gunshot deep high on the left side, the kind of wound that was serious about every third time and catastrophic about once in 10. "I put him down, but I don't know how far he got." "Which direction?" Collins moved his chin to the left. "East corridor, toward the records department." Claire pulled the trauma kit off her shoulder, opened it in the specific practice way of someone who has done this in worse light, in worse conditions, and had gauze and pressure applied before Collins had finished his next breath. "Keep your hand here," she said, moving his palm over the gauze. "Firm, not hard. You understand the difference?" "Yes, ma'am." "Don't move. Don't try to help. Someone is coming up behind us in approximately 4 minutes, and they are going to take over. Until then, you breathe and you press, and you don't do anything else." Collins looked up at her with the expression of a man who had been trained to push through pain and was currently making peace with being told not to. Understood, he said. Calloway had moved past them both. She was standing at the East Corridor junction with her back flat to the wall, listening in the direction Collins had indicated, and she looked back at Claire and held up two fingers. Two, not one. Collins had put one down, and there were two more in the East Corridor. Claire stood. She checked the corridor in both directions with the quick economy of someone who had cleared rooms in places that didn't make it into any official report, and then she looked at Hargrove. He was pale and his jaw was tight, but his eyes were steady. "Stay with him until Torres gets up here," she said quietly. "That's not Hargrove." She said his name the way she had said it downstairs, flat and certain and not open for discussion. "You have a compromised shoulder and approximately 60% of your normal blood volume. You are not coming with me into that corridor. You are staying here, you are watching Collins, and you are telling Torres which direction we went when he comes through that door. That is how you help me right now." Hargrove held her gaze for a long moment. He did not like it. She could see that he did not like it in every line of his face, and she noted it and moved past it because there was nothing either of them could do with it. "Fine," he said. "Thank you," she said, and she meant it, and she turned and walked toward Calloway without looking back. Calloway moved when Claire reached her, the two of them going into the East Corridor together, in the practiced silence of people who understood instinctively how to work a space without filling it with unnecessary communication. The corridor was dim, the overnight lighting cutting everything to shapes and suggestions, and Claire moved on memory more than vision. She had been on this floor twice before, once for a mandatory records orientation in her first month, and once when she had helped an elderly patient who had wandered off from the neurology ward, and she had done what she always did, mapped it quietly and filed it away in the part of her mind that kept things just in case. The first door on the left was supplies, closed. The second was the billing office, open. Calloway stopped her with one hand on her arm, not grabbing the light, two-fingered touch of someone communicating without force. Claire listened. Inside the billing office, something moved. A chair, maybe, or a cabinet, the sound of something being searched. She looked at Calloway. Calloway held up one finger. One person, she was reading the sound as one person, which meant the second one was somewhere else, which was the part of this that mattered. Claire pushed the door open. The man inside was not the volunteer jacket man from downstairs. She had already accounted for him. He was with Torres. This was someone else, younger, harder in the face, dressed in the same civilian but wrong way. And he had a tablet in his hands that he was pressing against the hospital's records terminal with the intent of someone who was not browsing. He looked up. Claire said, "Hands." He moved instead. Fast and sideways, going for the space between her and the door, which was exactly where she had expected him to go, and she let him have the first step before she took the second, and the space he was moving into was no longer there. She had his wrist and she had his balance, and she redirected both at an angle that put him against the filing cabinet with considerably less grace than he had brought to the attempt. The tablet clattered on the floor. Calloway had her knee on his back before he finished falling. "Who else is in the building?" Claire said. He said nothing. "The tablet," Claire said. Calloway picked it up, turned it over, looked at the screen. "What is it?" "Patient records access," Calloway said. Her voice had a quality Claire recognized, the tone of someone confirming something they already suspected. "He was trying to pull a file." "Which file?" Calloway turned the tablet so Claire could see the screen. The terminal was still open on a partially completed search. The name field had 4 letters in it. MORG. Claire looked at the screen for 2 seconds. Then she looked at the man on the floor. "Kessler sent you for a file," she said. "He still doesn't have the name confirmed. He sent you up here to get it from the records system." She crouched down to his level. Her voice was even unhurried, the voice of someone who was not asking a question, but naming a fact and waiting for the other person to catch up. "Which means he is not in this building. He is somewhere close. He is receiving information, and you are the information he is waiting for." The man's jaw was set. He had the look of someone who had decided that compliance was more dangerous than silence, which was a decision Claire had seen before and which told her something useful about who he was working for. "Close the terminal," she told Calloway. "Pull the Ethernet." Calloway did both. If he can't get the file, he has to make a different decision, and different decisions take time. She stood up. "Tie him and leave him. Torres will clear the floor." Calloway used the man's own belt and the cord from the terminal, which was not elegant but was effective. Claire was already at the door. The second person was still unaccounted for. She heard the shot before she processed what it was. The flat, suppressed crack of a weapon with a silencer. Not loud, not dramatic, the sound of it almost civilian, almost ordinary, except for the instinct that fired in her chest the instant it registered and sent her flat against the quarter wall with her hand on Calloway's sleeve, and both of them still before the echo finished. It had come from above them. The fourth floor. Medical imaging, Calloway said. Her voice was perfectly level. Who's on 4, Claire said. She was already moving toward the stairwell. Nobody's on 4, Calloway said. That's the point. Claire hit the stairwell door and went up, and when she came through the fourth floor door, she was moving faster than she had moved all night because the shot had been suppressed. But it had been a shot, and shots in hospitals had consequences that were not reversible once they happened. The fourth floor was medical imaging radiology. The MRI suite, the reading rooms where radiologists worked in the dark, interpreting images with the focused solitude of their particular specialty. It was empty at midnight. Skeleton staff on call, nobody physically present. Nobody except the woman sitting against the wall outside the MRI suite, with her hands pressed to her upper arm and her face white. Claire was beside her in 4 steps. She was in her 40s, dark-haired, wearing a hospital ID badge that identified her as a radiology technician. She had been shot through the outer muscle of her upper arm, painful, significant bleeding, not life-threatening if it was controlled right now, and Claire was already controlling it. "What are you doing up here?" Claire said. "I came in for an emergency scan," the woman said. Her voice was shaking, but she was present, tracking. "Dr. Webb called me in. There's a patient who needs—" "What did he look like? The man who shot you?" The woman blinked. Tall, dark jacket. He was on the phone. He looked at me, and I thought he was going to walk past, and then he... She stopped. Her throat worked. "He told me to go downstairs. I didn't move fast enough." "Can you walk?" "Oh, well, I think so." "Then we're going to the stairwell right now, and you're going to the second floor, and you're going to find a large woman with very short hair named Patricia, and you're going to say my name to her. Claire. She'll know what to do." Claire helped her up, checked her arm one more time, applied a pressure wrap from the trauma kit in 40 seconds. "Don't stop. Don't wait for anyone. Go." The woman went. Calloway was at the far end of the corridor. She had her phone out, not making a call, using the screen as a low mirror around the junction edge, checking what was beyond it without putting her head into the space. She looked back at Claire and mouthed one, and then pointed up. Up, 5th floor, one person moving up. Claire looked at the stairwell door at the end of the corridor. The 5th floor was the last occupied patient floor before the roof. Post-surgical recovery. Patients who were stable but not ready for transfer, most of them sedated or heavily medicated, almost none of them mobile. The most vulnerable population in the building tonight. Her jaw tightened. She went to the stairwell. Tora's voice came through Calloway's earpiece loud enough that Claire could hear it from 3 feet away. "Phoenix, we have a situation at the east entrance. 2 vehicles just pulled up, not staff, not law enforcement. We count 4 individuals." Calloway relayed it with her eyes. Claire did not stop moving. She said loud enough for the earpiece to carry, "How many people do you have mobile right now?" Tora's a beat of pause. 2, Reyes and myself. "Hargrove." From further away, she heard Hargrove's voice. "I'm here. East entrance. Can you get there?" "Yes." "Don't engage. Observe and report. I need to know if they're coming in or holding position." She hit the stairwell door. "Torres, I need you on 5. Now." "Phoenix, if you would hold your head, Torres." She was already on the stairs. "There are post-surgical patients on 5, and one of Kessler's people just went up ahead of me. I am not holding anything. Meet me on 5. She heard him moving. She also heard something else, the sound of the stairwell door above her 1 floor up opening and then closing with deliberate care. She took the stairs at a controlled run, and when she came through the 5th floor door, she was breathing hard but not labored, and she stood still for 2 seconds with her hand against the door and let her eyes adjust and her breathing slow, and her hearing sharpen the way she had been taught to do in a different life, in rooms that were darker than this and in situations where the margin was smaller. The fifth-floor recovery ward was a long corridor of semi-private rooms, each with a sliding glass panel and a curtain inside. The lights were at their lowest overnight setting. The monitors at each bedside created a low, continuous electronic murmur that filled the space with ambient sound, which was Claire recognized immediately both helpful and not helpful because it provided cover for her own movement, not helpful because it provided the same cover for whoever was ahead of her. She moved toward the nurse's station at the center of the floor. It was empty, which was wrong. The fifth floor overnight always had at least one nurse at the station. She looked at the station, looked at the rooms beyond it, and then she saw the overnight nurse. A young man named Theo, who she recognized from the elevator. Over the past 3 years, quiet kid usually had headphones on between rounds, sitting on the floor inside the medication room, with his hands zip-tied in front of him and a strip of tape across his mouth. He saw her. His eyes went wide. She held one finger to her lips, and he froze. She checked the zip ties too tight, she noted, which told her something about the person who had put them on, and pulled a pair of trauma shears from the kit and cut through both. She peeled the tape slowly, and he exhaled hard and silent. "How many?" she whispered. "One," Theo whispered back. He went toward the last room, room 15. Room 15. Claire went through the roster in her head. She had not worked 5 in 3 months, but she kept track. She always kept track. Room 15, as of this morning's floor census, was holding a 68-year-old man named Richard Alderman. Post-cardiac surgery, day 3 recovery, stable but not mobile. Not a random patient. She looked at Theo. "Stay here. Don't open that door until I come back for you." She left the medication room. Room 15 was at the far end of the corridor, and the sliding panel on its glass was pulled mostly shut, the curtain inside drawn. Claire approached it the way she had been trained to approach unknown spaces, not fast, not cautious, at the pace that created no sound, and committed to nothing until the last possible moment. She put her hand on the panel and looked through the narrow gap in the curtain. The man in the dark jacket had his back to her. He was standing beside the bed. He had a phone in one hand raised, and he was photographing the patient, not the patient's face, she realized. He was photographing the patient's chart, the paper chart on the clipboard at the bedside. He was not here to hurt Richard Alderman. He was here for information that Richard Alderman's chart contained. Claire ran the name again. Richard Alderman, 68, cardiac surgery. And then something clicked in the back of her mind, quiet and certain, the way things clicked when they had been sitting in the wrong category, and suddenly the right one became obvious. Alderman. Richard Alderman. She had seen that name before, and not here. She had seen it on a briefing document she was not supposed to have read 4 years ago in a room in a building that no longer officially existed. She had read it in 3 seconds and filed it and never thought about it again because she had been very good at reading things quickly and moving on and pretending she had not retained them. Richard Alderman was a federal judge. He was the judge who had been scheduled to hear the case against Kessler before Kessler's extraction happened, and the case was sealed and everyone involved either transferred, reassigned, or in Claire's case died. He was here. He had a different name on his hospital chart, but he was here and he was alive, and Kessler had sent someone to find out exactly that. The man with the phone pressed send. Claire pushed the door open. He turned. She was already inside his reach, already past the point where the phone or the weapons she could see at his hip were useful to him, and she had his phone hand controlled and his body momentum redirected before he had finished turning, and the phone hit the floor and skidded under the bed, and the man hit the wall beside the door with a controlled impact that stunned without destroying because she needed him conscious. Richard Alderman woke up. He looked at the two of them with the glazed, morphine-filtered confusion of a man who has been deeply asleep and is trying to process what he's waking up to. "It's all right," Claire said to him clearly and calmly. "I'm a nurse. You're safe. Close your eyes." He looked at her for a moment. Then, with the trust of someone too medicated to distrust, he closed them. Claire pulled the man in the dark jacket's hands behind him and looked at the room. Torres came through the door 30 seconds later, weapon up, and stopped when he saw the situation was already resolved. He looked at the man. He looked at Claire. He looked at the phone on the floor. He made, "Is that?" "He sent a photograph," Claire said. "Alderman is alive, and Kessler knows it now." She stood up. Her voice was controlled, but underneath it, Torres could hear something that had been building all night finally reaching the surface. Not panic. the opposite of panic. The specific, focused intensity of someone who has just understood the full shape of the problem and has already begun working on the solution. Which means Kessler knows his case can be reopened, which means everything that happens in the next hour happens because of that photograph. Torres said, "What does that mean for us?" Claire picked up the phone from under the bed with a gloved hand. The screen was cracked but lit. The photograph had been sent. She could see the sent confirmation in the messaging app encrypted a number she didn't recognize. She looked at the timestamp on the send. 40 seconds ago. It means, Claire said, that he's already moving. She looked at Torres. Get Alderman moved. Different room, different floor, different name on the chart. Do it in the next 10 minutes. She was already at the door. And get me a line to Mitchell. Torres said, Mitchell's in transit. I don't care where he is, Claire said. Get me a line. She walked out into the corridor, and the night, which had already been the longest of her 3-year at Boston University Hospital, shifted again, tightened, sharpened, became the thing it had been building toward all along. She could feel it the way she used to feel it in the field, that particular quality of air, in the last minutes before everything committed, when all the moving pieces had finally found their positions, and the only thing left was the action itself. Calloway was at the stairwell door. Torres filled me in, she said. Alderman. Alderman, Claire confirmed. If Kessler's moving, he comes here or he runs. He comes here, Claire said, without hesitation. Alderman is the only witness left who can put him away for life. He doesn't run with that still breathing. Calloway looked at her. Then we're out of time. Yes, Claire said, we are. From somewhere below them, deep in the building's bones, an alarm sounded. Not a medical alarm. A different tone lowered the building's security system, which meant someone had forced an entrance somewhere that was not designed to be forced. Claire and Calloway looked at each other. East entrance, Claire said. 4 individuals, Calloway said, echoing Torres's count from 5 minutes ago. They weren't holding position, Claire said. She was already running. The security alarm was the kind of sound that changed a building's temperature. Claire felt it, not just heard it, felt it, in the way the hospital shifted around her as she ran, the way the distant voices on the floors below went from the low hum of controlled overnight operations to something sharper, more uncertain, the sound of people who had been managing a difficult night, suddenly understanding that difficult had become something else entirely. She hit the stairwell and went down, and Calloway was with her. And Torres's voice was in Calloway's earpiece, talking fast and low, feeding information that Calloway was processing and relaying in clipped phrases between floors. East entrance breach confirmed. 2 and 2 holding outside. Which corridor? Claire said. Main ground floor, moving toward the bay. Claire did the map in her head. East entrance to main bay was 90 seconds at a walk. Less if they were running. She had maybe 40 seconds before they reached the bay doors, and in the bay, still recovering, still on stretchers, were Reyes and the other operators Torres had not been able to move in time. She came through the second-floor stairwell door at a controlled run and almost collided with Hargrove, who was coming from the opposite direction, with his arms strapped to his chest and his face set in the expression of a man who had disobeyed a direct instruction and was completely unrepentant about it. East entrance, he said. I know, she said. I saw them come in, he said. Claire. He used her name, not the other one, which meant something was happening on his face that she did not have time to read. The man behind them, the one who walked in last. She stopped. He didn't come in with the others, Hargrove said. He came in alone, 20 seconds after. And he walked differently, not like an operator, not like support. He walked like someone who owns the space he's walking into. Claire looked at him. I've seen that walk before, Hargrove said. One other time, in a deposition room across a table before the case got sealed. Kessler, she said. Kessler, he said. The name moved through her the way it had moved through her downstairs, the same dislodging sensation in the same deep place, except this time it did something different. This time it cleared. The way a road clears when fog burns off, not gradually, all at once, the whole thing visible from end to end, every obstacle and every distance. He was here, he had come himself, which meant he was not running, which she had already known, but it also meant something more than that. It meant he was certain. It meant he believed that what he was walking into was a hospital with 4 injured operators, 1 intelligence officer of uncertain status and a nurse who was supposed to be dead. He did not know the full picture. He was certain based on incomplete information, which was the most dangerous kind of certain. "Where is he now?" she said. "Coming toward the bay," Hargrove said. He let the two operators go ahead of him. "He's staying back." Claire turned to Calloway. "Can you get a line to Mitchell right now? Not in 5 minutes." "Right now." Calloway already had the phone to her ear. "Trying." "Tell him Kessler is in the building. Tell him we need federal authority at this location in the next hour, or everything that happens tonight is inadmissible." She looked at Hargrove. "How far behind you are the two who breached?" "A minute, maybe less. Then we move." She looked at both of them. "Hargrove, you go to the bay and you stay with the team. You do not engage unless they come through the bay doors, and if they do, you make noise. You make it loud, and you give me time." "Time for what?" he said. "I'm going to find Kessler," she said. Hargrove's jaw went tight. "Claire, that is not—" "He came here for Alderman," she said. "He doesn't know Alderman is already moved. He's going to go to medical records, or he's going to go to someone who can tell him which floor Alderman is on. There are only two people in this building right now who could tell him that: Renee at the station, who doesn't know the new room, and Patricia, who does." She held Hargrove's gaze. "I need to get to Patricia before he does." Hargrove stared at her for 2 long seconds. Then he stepped aside. She went. Patricia Osei was not at the nurse's station. She was not in the East Wing where she had sent the non-critical patients earlier. Claire found her in the medication room on the 2nd floor, standing with her arms crossed and her expression at its most controlled, which meant she was managing something that had tested that control significantly. "There's a man," Patricia said before Claire could speak. "He came to the floor 2 minutes ago asking for the supervisor. He said there was a patient transfer issue and he needed to see the updated room assignments." Claire went still. "Where is he now?" "I told him to wait in the family consultation room," Patricia said. "Second door on the left." She paused. "I told him it would be 10 minutes. I knew something was wrong the moment he opened his mouth." She looked at Claire with the level, perceptive gaze of a woman who had been reading people across high-stakes situations for 20 years. "He's not family. He's not administration. His hands were too still." Claire looked at her for a moment. "Patricia?" "Yes. You just bought me the most important 10 minutes of this entire night." Patricia did not look surprised. She did not look afraid. She looked, if anything, quietly and profoundly satisfied. "Go," she said. The family consultation room was small. A table, 4 chairs, a box of tissues on the window ledge that had not been restocked in 2 weeks. Claire opened the door and closed it behind her before the man inside had fully registered that she was not Patricia returning with paperwork. He was in his late 50s. Lean, not slight, the leanness of someone who maintained it deliberately. His hair was gray at the temples and darker above, and he was dressed in the specific way of someone who wanted to look ordinary and had the money and practice to do it almost perfectly. Almost. The shoes were wrong. The shoes were the kind of shoes that cost what a nurse made in a month and could not be faked down to ordinary no matter how the rest of the outfit tried. Claire had built a picture of him across 4 years from fragments, testimony transcripts she had read in a safe house in the 3 weeks before her extraction, surveillance photographs that were grainy and angled wrong, the single deposition recording she had been played in a room with no windows before the case was sealed and everyone went in different directions, and she came to Boston and became invisible. He looked exactly like the picture in her head and nothing like it simultaneously. Real people always did. "Claire Morgan," he said. He said it the way people say things they've been planning to say, with the satisfaction of arrival. She sat down across from him. She put her hands flat on the table. She did not say anything. He looked at her hands. He looked at her face. Something moved in his expression, not surprise. He had prepared himself not to be surprised, but something adjacent to it. The recalibration of a man who had built a model of this moment and was now encountering the real version and finding it slightly different from the model. "You're not what I expected," he said. "I know," she said. "The photograph was bad. I thought you'd be—" He paused. "Harder to find." "You didn't find me," she said. "You walked into a building and I've been in for 3 years. That's not finding. That's arriving late." Something flickered in his eyes, not anger, interest. The clinical interest of a man who appreciated precision. Where is Alderman? Safe, she said. That's not an answer. That's the only answer you're getting, she said. He leaned back in his chair with the ease of a man who had run negotiations across tables far more hostile than this one. You understand that the photograph was sent, he said. My people confirmed Alderman is alive. The case can be refiled. That process takes months, possibly longer. Judges retire. Witnesses develop health complications. He said the last two words with a casualness that made them land harder than anything loud could have. I have considerable patience. I know, Claire said. That's what the file said. He looked at her. The sealed file, she said. The one that doesn't officially exist. I read it 4 years ago in a room I wasn't supposed to be in, and I retained it the way I retain everything which is completely and permanently. She watched his face. Every name, every transaction, every wire transfer, and every meeting, and every person who was in those rooms with you going back 11 years. The quality of his stillness changed. It was the same posture but different in the way that still water is different from still air. You testified to none of that, he said. I was extracted before I could, she said. You know that. That's why you had the file pulled. That's why the case was sealed. She paused. That's why you spent 4 years believing I was dead. And yet, he said. And yet, she said. His jaw was set. Behind it, she could see the machinery working, the same kind of machinery she had, the sorting and the calculating, the rapid assessment of positions and leverage, and what could still be salvaged from a situation that had shifted. The photograph is already transmitted, he said. Even if you have Alderman moved, even if you have whatever you think you have on me, you can't undo what was sent tonight. My legal team is going to be very busy, Claire said, starting with explaining to a federal judge why their client was present in a hospital that was the site of an unauthorized breach, an assault on a federal officer, and the attempted access of protected patient records. She tilted her head slightly. That's before we get to the file I've been carrying in my head for 4 years. He looked at her for a long time. The room was very quiet. Outside, somewhere on the floor, she could hear footsteps, more than one set purposeful, converging. You have no corroboration, he said. I have the men on the stretchers downstairs, she said. I have the operator you put in the ground in the north stairwell who is alive and conscious and whose account of this evening is going to be detailed and on the record. I have the photograph your man sent from medical imaging, which was sent from a device that is now in federal custody. She paused. And I have you, in this room, which you walked into voluntarily. The door opened. Torres came in first, weapon up, professional, reading the room in 2 seconds and landing on Kessler with the focus of someone who had been waiting for this exact moment and had prepared for it carefully. Behind Torres, Calloway, and behind Calloway, a voice Claire recognized before she saw the face. Claire. The voice was 60-something and authoritative in a way that was not performed the authority of someone who had spent decades making decisions in rooms where the decisions were real. Admiral Mitchell. He was in civilian clothes, travel-worn, his face carrying the specific exhaustion of a man who had been in transit since before this night began and had been running on urgency and determination the entire way. He stood in the doorway and looked at the room. He looked at Kessler. He looked at Claire. You're alive, he said. Yes, she said. Something moved across his face that was not quite what she had expected. It was not relief, not exactly. It was older than relief. Heavier, the expression of a man carrying something he had been carrying for 4 years and had not fully allowed himself to put down until this moment. I know what you thought, she said. Her voice was not unkind. We'll talk about it. Torres had Kessler on his feet and his hands secured before Kessler had fully decided whether to resist, and then the decision had been made for him, and he was standing with his wrists bound and his face working through something Claire did not bother to read because it was no longer relevant to the next hour of her life. Kessler looked at her one last time. This isn't over, he said. Yes, she said. It is. She did not say it loudly. She did not say it with the heat of someone who needed him to believe it. She said it the way she said things that were simply true, flatly, clearly, with the same energy she had used 3 years ago, telling patients their vitals were stable and their numbers were good. The certainty of someone who has checked the facts and confirmed them. Torres took him out. Mitchell stood in the doorway and looked at Claire, and she looked back at him, and the weight of 4 years sat between them in a way that would take more than one conversation to unpack. She understood that. She was not impatient with it. Alderman, he said, moved and stable, 5th floor, new room, new name on the chart. Theo has the room number. Collins. Stable, knife wound left side. He needs a surgical consult, but he'll be fine. Reyes, better than when he got here. She paused. Hargrove pushed it, but he's intact. Mitchell nodded. He was looking at her with the expression of a man assembling something in real time, not just this night, but all the nights that had led to it, the 4 years of distance and silence, and the particular kind of grief that attaches itself to a name on a casualty list. I should have looked harder, he said. You looked where the evidence pointed, she said. I made sure it pointed the wrong way. He looked at her. You were protecting yourself. I was doing my job, she said. Same as always, just a different job for a while. He almost smiled. It did not quite arrive, but it got close. Are you coming back? She was quiet for a moment. She thought about Base 7 and Gerald Hutchins and his wife Donna, with her coat still on, holding his hand. She thought about Theo on the floor with zip ties on his wrists, trusting her when she said, close your eyes and stay here. She thought about Patricia standing in the medication room with her arms crossed, buying her 10 minutes without being asked, because she was the kind of person who read rooms correctly and acted without needing the whole explanation. I don't know yet, she said, but I know where I've been for the last 3 years, and I know what I did here tonight, and I know it was not nothing. Mitchell looked at her for a long moment. No, he said, it was not nothing. Calloway was leaning against the wall outside in the corridor when Claire stepped out, and she straightened when Claire came through the door and said nothing for a moment, which Claire had come to understand was Calloway's way of giving her space, the quiet that offered itself without demanding anything in return. The building's clear, Calloway said. Torres has the count. All of Kessler's people are either secured or outside in federal custody. The 2 who stayed at the east entrance didn't run. They didn't know it was over yet, Claire said. People rarely do, Calloway said. Claire walked back to the main bay. The walk took 90 seconds, and in those 90 seconds, the hospital sounded different than it had sounded at any point during the night, not quieter, not louder, but settled the way things sound when the thing that had been wrong has been corrected and the air has not quite figured out how to account for the absence of it yet. Hargrove was where she had told him to be. He was sitting at the edge of the stretcher, upright pale, and when he saw her come through the bay doors, the tension in his face released in the way tension releases when it has been held for the specific duration of someone's absence, and their return means it no longer needs to be held. Clear, he said. Clear, she said. Kessler, in custody. He looked at her. He looked at the bay around him, the monitors, the staff who had quietly filtered back in doctor. Webb at the station with his head bent over something he was writing, and his shoulders carrying a different quality than they had carried at the start of the shift. He looked at Claire. You know this doesn't go back in the box, he said. Whatever comes next, the testimony, the case, all of it, you can't be invisible anymore. I know, she said. Is that okay? She thought about it. The honest answer, not the easy one. The answer that accounted for 3 years of night shifts and baggy scrubs and picking charts up off the floor without a word. The answer that accounted for what she had done tonight in this building, in these corridors with these people. Ask me in a week, she said. Hargrove nodded like that was good enough. Then because he was Hargrove and he had known her long enough to understand that she needed to move before she needed to talk, he said, Reyes wants to know if he can have something to eat. Claire almost laughed. It was not much of a laugh. It was the kind that comes out of exhaustion and relief and the specific absurdity of a night that had held everything it had held and was now ending with a question about hospital food, but it was real and it was hers and she let it happen. Tell him to ask Patricia, she said. She walked to the window at the end of the bay. Outside, the sky over Boston was doing the thing it did in the last hour before dawn, not yet light, not fully dark, that particular quality of blue that existed only in the space between brief and specific and entirely its own thing. Webb came and stood beside her, Not close, just present in the way of someone who has something to say and is deciding whether to say it. She waited. I owe you an apology, he said. More than one. Yes, she said, you do. He looked at her profile. She could feel it. Is this the part where you tell me it doesn't matter? No, she said. It matters. You dropping that chart on the floor matters. The way you spoke to me in front of residents for 3 years matters. She turned and looked at him. But you also stepped back tonight when it counted, and you moved those patients without panic, and you spent 2 hours working that bay like the physician you actually are. She held his gaze. So we start from here. Webb looked at her for a long moment. He nodded once. It was not a small nod. He walked away. Claire turned back to the window. Mitchell was somewhere behind her, Calloway somewhere to her left, and the night that had tried very hard to undo everything she had quietly built over 3 careful years had failed at the task because the woman standing at the window of that hospital bay was not undone. She was the opposite of undone. She was the most assembled she had been in 4 years, the most fully herself, every piece of her present in the same room at the same time for the first time since she had walked away from the life that had made her and into the one she had built from nothing. Claire Morgan had survived being erased. She had survived being found. She had survived the night and the man who had sent it, and she had done it in the building where she had spent 3 years learning quietly and without recognition that taking care of people was not a lesser calling than anything she had done before it. Phoenix had risen, but Claire Morgan had never actually fallen. She had only been waiting for the world to catch up to what she had always been. And tonight in a hospital in Boston at the edge of dawn, it finally had.